asking questions is definitely important for science. And without it, science would die. Can people question anything with absolute freedom and without any limitations? I don't mean trolling, obviously, but actual questions for clarification and scientific advancements. Sure, unless you dare question Darwin, Darwin is off limits. If you do, you'll be attacked with fallacies such as circular reasoning and ad hominems. Oh, and don't forget stopping of fundings and canceling. Yes, this is kind of dramatic, but this is exactly what happens. Let's look at real life examples and why this is a bad thing for scientific mindsets. A while back, secular scientists claimed that there are no credible scientists who doubt neo Darwinian evolution. So, some scientists, being scientists, while others were too afraid to speak up, signed a public statement called the Scientific Dissent from Darwinism. At first, 100 people signed it. However, now there are over 1,000 signatures. The statement that they signed to show their agreement with was, "We are skeptical of claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged." What? How dare they? Careful examination of the evidence should be encouraged? That's not what scientists do. Wait, oh, that is what they do. Well, the late Gunther Beckley, effectively forced out of his position at the State Museum of Natural History of Stuttgart as curator. Stephen Myers, largely excluded from mainstream scientific discussions and journals. Michael Behe, similar to Stephen Myers. James Tour. He was refused awards and faced public personal attacks. Okay, the list is big, but every single person mentioned here before and forward were all accused of bringing religion into science. William A. Dembski, Jonathan Wells, Michael Egnor, etc. The backlash was and is still great. They have experienced loss of credibility, dismissal from positions, difficulties in securing grants, accused of doing pseudoscience and creationism, ostracism, public ridicule, and even legal challenges. Is this how science is supposed to be done? I honestly can't see the reason why people with different paradigms can't be part of a research team. As long as the person gets the job done, does it really matter? They are excluding potentially brilliant people based on their beliefs, which is just unwise. Imagine excluding Newton from research teams because his theistic paradigm, or Galileo, or Copernicus, or Kepler, or Pascal, or Planck. That would be utterly ridiculous. Ostracizing people based on their beliefs has a big potential for problem for collaboration. Some of these fathers of modern science were ID in a modern sense, as in they believed that the universe was understandable because it was designed by a creator with a logical mind. So, this authoritarian type of behavior by the secular scientist community is really unfit for the scientific mindset of willingness to collaborate. Still, ID is not real science, right? It doesn't predict. Well, it did. It predicted that junk DNA would be largely functional. So let's see how Darwinism did with the predicting stuff. Darwinism made a prediction that a bunch of transition fossils would be found as people found more and more fossils. Did it? No. Darwin hoped that once the fossil record was more complete, a clearer picture of gradualism would be seen. However, that is not what happened at all. It was so incomplete that Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge came up with the idea of punctuated equilibrium. Which leads me to the next segment of how secularism harms the scientific mindset of humility, or the willingness to admit a problem. The ability to predict is a really important aspect of a theory because if the opposite of the prediction keeps happening, it means there's something wrong with the theory. But not for Darwinism. There are two circular reasoning which makes people so blind to see the problems. First is the incompleteness of the fossil record. They say that only non-transition fossils survive while the transitional fossils were destroyed and didn't survive. That is just damn convenient, isn't it? Ad hoc much. By the way, according to the collector's curve, we are pretty much at the end of our discovery of fossils. The second circular reasoning is evidence that do not fit the theory is seen as improvement to the theory. That doesn't make any sense. I guess if you want to improve your understanding, you need to take in evidence and change your perspectives. However, this is some crazy level of mental gymnastics. What happened with punctuated equilibrium was that the evidence didn't fit their theory, so they changed their theory. Then, they started to say how punctuated equilibrium was good evidence that evolution is true. I honestly don't understand that logic at all. If I say all birds are blue, then someone shows me a green bird, then I think to myself, oh, this challenges my theory. So instead of me saying my theory is wrong, I say green is a type of blue. Then I say that the green birds are evidence for my bluebird theory, which is ridiculous. How about just throwing away the theory and making a new one? That would make more sense, am I right? These are the reasons why, despite the secular scientists' claims that ID is not falsifiable, Darwinism is also not falsifiable due to how people do mental gymnastics to make it unable to be proven wrong. Another important point is that humility needs self awareness. You can't just go around saying others are bad when you have the same problem. What I mean is, secular scientists are extreme hypocrites when they call ID pseudoscience because ID is not falsifiable. They claim ID is unfalsifiable because you can't prove there to be no intelligent cause behind the universe. Never mind that ID is not working on God of the gaps but using philosophy instead. They are using inference to the best explanation, and it is perfectly fine, especially in a forensic setting. Historical science for the first life and the beginning of the universe is pretty much forensic science for the universe, which needs inference to the best explanation. Anyway, secular scientists, you are guilty of being unfalsifiable too. Secularism is unfalsifiable one level before the ID movement because they assume that everything in nature can be explained by natural means. They are unfalsifiable via circular reasoning. Hooray! They assume that there is only the material world, then say that because there is only the material world, everything can be explained through natural means. Circular reasoning like this makes theories unfalsifiable. Bringing it back to punctuated equilibrium, secular scientists have made it so that nothing can be a proof against Darwinism because they decided that no other alternative explanations can exist, no matter how much the new evidence doesn't fit their theories. This happens in abiogenesis as well. I heard this from people before. Chemical evolution must be true. Why? Because we are here. What in the world? Speaking of abiogenesis, let's talk about how secularism is showing the ugly side of science and how they will let anything pass if it supports their paradigm. What I'm talking about is the attention to detail, which is a vital scientific mindset. So, this is how chemistry is normally done. Notice how everything is super detailed and there is no ambiguity. Science is done this way, unless you are in abiogenesis. If you're in abiogenesis, you use extrapolations, misleading titles, use words like could have, might have, and nudged. This is Dr. James Tour, by the way. He is kind of a big deal in chemistry. He has received so many negative attention from the secular scientists. Why? Because he asked questions. He is a chemist who asked questions about chemistry and was personally attacked for it. You see, Dr. James Tour realized how the chemistry in abiogenesis didn't really work out. Chemistry doesn't really care about life, and the problems Dr. Tour pointed out are pretty significant. There is a whole series on abiogenesis by Dr. Tour, so go and check it out. From the problems he pointed out, I want to give an example which might not seem like much, but it is a monstrously big problem. The available materials decrease exponentially as steps increase. It is because in every step, only a fraction of the product is useful for the next step. Let's say that you get 10% yield in step 1. Then you will need to use the 10% that you got to carry on to the next step. If it is 10% yield again, then you just lost 90% of the product from the 10% from the previous step. There are so many other problems, like the chemicals needed in a previous step is actually harmful for the next step, or like the environment being extremely implausible. For example, there are steps to chemical synthesis where one step needs room temperature, some at 100 degrees, and some in ice cold water. How do you get these organic molecules or building blocks of them moving from a hydrothermal vent to ice cold water without decomposing or bonding with some other chemical and becoming useless? Just looking at the steps involved screams that life did not start the way the abiogenesis scientists claim it did. So, are they addressing these problems? Nope, they just evoke some sort of outer force other than chemistry to explain the chemistry. Do the secular scientists hold these abiogenesis scientists to the standards that should be required to do science? Nope, they get a pass on everything and too much fundings for having had achieved pretty much nothing. In conclusion, no, secularism doesn't really do any good for science. It doesn't have any advantage for the scientific mindset. Curiosity, skepticism, open mindedness, or willingness to adapt beliefs based on new information, persistence, collaboration, humility, and attention to detail. Secularism is unfalsifiable and has too much circular reasoning. Unlike what secular scientists claim, secular science is not liberating but extremely limiting. Secularism is very authoritarian and uses everything but science to try to argue. As Thomas Kuhn has said before, the old paradigm dies hard. It is not replaced until the scientists who have been trained in it are no longer in positions of power. It is time for a paradigm shift. The more we find out about science, the more it is becoming clear that the universe has a creator. I hope that the future generations will open their eyes and not allow themselves to be trapped in such presupposition called secularism. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe and hit that like button.